everything that I know. Says I gotta go, tired of going solo. But I'm never gonna go there again. This is what it is, this is who I am. This is where I finally take my stand. I didn't want to fall, but I don't have to crawl. I'm not the one with two star hands. Giving him the best of everything that's left of the life inside this man. I've been born again.
Eddie Huff here with you on another Saturday, Sunday, whatever day it is where you are listening or watching this. I've got my pal and friend, sidekick, and whatever else he may be.
I'm proud to be your
master of none, Dave Van Risingen. And we've got our special guest once again, Randy Krehbiel of the Tulsa World, who we're very happy to have with us. We've got a special edition again today, a post-primary race edition of Fresh Black Coffee, and no one better to have in studio than Randy Krehbiel. And Randy, welcome once again to Fresh Black Coffee.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, by the way, a little inside, we're doing this over again because we had a little glitch. So we're trying to
We had good pre-show production.
Exactly, we did.
more than we planned.
Right. So we're gonna back up.
Now that we hit the record button.
Yes, that is it. So anyway, yes, we had primary elections in Oklahoma this past weekend. This past Tuesday. This is the weekend. 4th of July, by the way, Independence Day. And, but we did have primary elections here in a few other states. Some of the outcomes I feel were surprising. Some weren't. And we are going to discuss those today with you and give you an opportunity to get some insights on what happened and what could possibly happen here in the future.
Right.
And hopefully help you, guide you towards the future. So I'm going to turn this over to Dave and Randy to discuss.
And those of you who've been following the show for the last few months know in mid-April we had Randy in. It was a great treat because it was right after candidate filing. And Randy was kind of helping us walk through this, give us a little sense, a little color commentary of this. And then we got done and I said, hey, Randy, how about you come back after the primary? And he made good on his word. And here we are, 4th of July weekend, getting ready to go have some relaxation time. Randy, what do you think of the election?
Well, I don't know that there was anything that surprised me a lot, but there were some things that I found pretty interesting. We had I didn't really count, and I guess it depends on how you count, but we had a lot of incumbents, Republican incumbents, challenged in these primaries. 3 incumbents lost, which historically is, that's actually a fairly high number. Now, it's not like 2018.
Yeah, that was a big one.
That was a big one, but before 2016, I think there'd been very, very few incumbents ever lost in a primary. And it seemed like these challenges were more organized. And we had a lot of outside money come in for some of them. There were about 4 House races and 2 or 3 state Senate races that were pretty high dollar. I mean, I was looking there. So there was, as I mentioned, that I think on the state races, there were like $9 million in independent expenditures. That's money that's spent by somebody not associated with the campaigns.
Yeah, and I want to get into that. Let's just look at the marquee races here.
But bookmark that, because I would like to know where this money is coming from and to what end. In other words, is there a specific, is it teacher, labor, union, tribes, whatever, where specifically that money is coming from for people to know? Because I think it's really important.
Right, because that issue impacts a whole lot of races across the spectrum. So I want to at least give the news what races were big.
And what's surprising is that we're not talking national races, for federal office. We're talking state office. Now, if we're getting dark money.
We had dark money in school board elections this year.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
So it's fair to say probably teacher union, education.
Well, actually, most of the dark money, best we can figure, comes from some of the school choice organizations. Mm-hmm. I think, the
so it's the other side. Okay. Huh.
So, but let's go into the marquee races. Okay, but there's both U.S. Senate seats, which is kind of rare.
Yeah, it's really rare.
Right, and that's because Inhofe decided to hang it up here in an organized way. He's going to stay on until we're ready to swear in his successor. Mm-hmm. So, and then the other one, Langford, which after, the things involving post-election 2020, a lot of people on the right became disenchanted with him. I think Eddie and I feel some of that ourselves, we've talked about. But not getting into that, he drew a novice, Jackson Lawmeyer, local minister, who got 30% of the vote. Which is a little bit high, or was it 30 or 20?
It's not quite. I think it's like 26 or
26, okay.
Something like that.
Yeah. But, and then the other race, Mark Wayne Mullen, he really showed, his strength. Mm-hmm. And I think from this way, it's just about a cakewalk. T.W. Shannon doesn't have but maybe a third of those. Well, a little more than a third. It's 17% to like 45 or so.
Correct. Yeah.
So, and then Nathan Dahm got 12% in that, which I think you'd said was a little more than you thought. Yeah, because he didn't have a lot of big money other than Rand Paul had a PAC. Yeah,
and I don't know that he's really I guess he's known. You always have to keep in mind with a primary who your audience is. It's different than a general election, voter group, but I'm not sure he's that well known out of the Tulsa area. It seems like state representatives and state senators are never quite as well known as they think they are.
Yeah.
And it's the same, and it's even the same with members of Congress. They think, in their district they may be well known, but you go down the turnpike or a couple of turnpikes and they may not know who you are.
Yeah. Now, I went to the horse races in a political campaign. The 2nd District broke out in the middle of Kentucky Derby. I mean, I felt like I was watching, a photo finish.
Well, it's really more like roller derby, actually.
Yes.
They're elbowing people over the rails.
Howard Cosell used to broadcast those. Oh, I remember that in the 70s. But anyway, nobody got 15%.
No, it was, I really didn't know what to expect there, and I really didn't find anybody who would say they did, and that was pretty well, I think, borne out. The two top guys together were under 30% combined, but we also, I think, had five of them were over 10%. So we had 5 people between 10 and 14%, basically. Mm-hmm. Actually, I think Fricks, who was first, almost got 15%.
Yeah.
He was over 14%, but basically they were between 10 and 14%.
Yeah, and I was having lunch yesterday in Stillwater with former mayor of Newkirk, Brian Hobbs, who worked on John Bennett's campaign. And he said Bennett called him Tuesday in the middle afternoon. He says, I think we've got this one. He said, I think I may get 50% outright. Okay, now, and that's what Hobbs is telling me at lunch yesterday. But here's the thing. John Bennett got 51% in his home county.
I didn't even look at that.
He did. Yeah. And this is what you're saying. You think that in your district you're somebody, and that doesn't transfer over to a big congressional district, which that one is 20 some counties, is it?
I don't remember, but it's roughly, it's almost, it's at least a quarter of the land area. It's probably closer to a third. The 3rd district and the 2nd district are really huge. The 4th district is sort of medium sized, and then the 1st and the 5th keep getting smaller geographically because they're more, they're more densely populated.
Yeah. So anyway, now we've got Avery Fricks from the Muskogee area, and Josh Brackeen from down towards Durant, that area.
Yeah.
And I like to say we got the Cherokees versus the Choctaws, which you said you don't think either of those guys are tribal members.
Not that I know of. I mean, I could very easily be wrong.
But that kills my narrative. So
yeah, right. Well,
keep it low.
Well, so, David, the guy that made all those advertisements in the 70s and 80s, the guy that was the Indian standing
Oh,
on.
yeah, with the tear.
With the tear.
Yeah, it turns out he wasn't really an Indian.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how that fits into this,
Culture
and we're probably going to have some tribal people unhappy.
So what's wrong with the tribes? How did they not support their people, Teehee or No Fire or one of the others?
Well, I think they did, except that they, so
they
both,
split.
yeah, so both Guy, I'm having a blank on Guy's last name. Guy Barker.
Yes.
He's Osage and Ottawa, Quapaw.
Yeah.
And then you got Teehee, Cherokee, and there's several other tribal members who were in there.
Cherokee, yeah.
And so, but anyway, Barker and Teehee were close. I mean, they were one of those, they were each one of those who was right in there.
Now, where's Barker from?
So, Guy Barker, spent his childhood in Commerce. And then when he was in high school, his family moved to Tulsa. Mm-hmm. And he went to Memorial High School for a while, but he graduated from Holland Hall. And then he went to Oklahoma State, got an engineering degree. Then he went to OCU and got a law degree. And he's in the oil business, and he's also the treasurer of the Quapaw Nation.
Yeah, I noticed down in Okmulgee County, I think he took that county. So I just thought maybe that was his home turf. But
no. No. And, I mean, that's part of the mathematics here is that, you had three candidates from Muskogee.
Yeah.
Who and Muskogee is one of the bigger population centers in that district. And so, those guys split that up and, will Fricks get those votes? I don't know. We really do have kind of a north versus south because it does seem to make a difference north of I-40 and south of I-40. And I noticed, even now, even though they vote very heavily Republican generally in general elections down in Little Dixie, there still don't seem to be that many registered Republicans because there weren't because there weren't that many votes cast in some of those counties in this past primary.
And that's to your point, Dustin Roberts in leadership in the House, decided to run. And what I heard is the Choctaws had got behind him. But if you don't have registered Republicans, that doesn't translate to votes. But growing, you and I both were here in the 80s, back in the days when Sinar and West Watkins were the 2nd and 3rd district. And I always think of that Little Dixie area south of I-40 was the old-fashioned 3rd district. So I feel like right now it's like the 2nd district versus the 3rd district.
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I like the Choctaws Cherokees. Anytime it's stirrup dissension and trouble, I'm sorry. Well, but none of the rest of the House races. I mean, they were yawners, right? I mean, Hearn didn't even have an opponent in the party. The other guys, they still had no problem getting 60, 70%.
Correct. The races were kind of interesting just from the standpoint of who turns out and what do they have to say. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what sort of a chord are they trying to strike? And so, you had Wade Burleson in the 3rd district, and he actually I haven't gone back and looked. I would venture to say that this is the closest election, even though Frank Lucas won by more than 30 points, it might be the closest election he's had since he was first elected. I mean, the guy's record is unbelievable. Yeah. If you look at he just wins by huge margins every time.
But the general election is going to be interesting because he took on a whole bunch of staunchly Democrat South Oklahoma City, very Hispanic area and black area. So there's that. Now, I want to take that narrative about the incumbent roughly getting 2/3 of the vote, because we saw that also in statewide races. You saw Mulready didn't have any opponent for insurance commissioner. Matt Pinnell had no primary opponent. And you've had, a number of those, the auditor, a few others, they're doing fine, but there's a few, well, even the governor, fine. But the attorney general and labor commissioner are going to, the attorney general, he got defeated by 1% or 2. But labor commissioner's going to a runoff. Now that's interesting.
Right. And that's an office that, all those down ballot, races are very difficult because you have to run a statewide campaign just like you would for governor, but there's no money for it.
No, you can't raise money.
And so you just kind of have to go on reputation or hope nobody notices and enough of your friends show up to get you elected. So, that was a three-way, I think it was 3.
Swinton, Roberts.
Right. And so that was a 3-way. And I think Leslie Osborne got like in the mid to high 40s.
Yeah.
And Sean Roberts was like, as I recall, around 38 or something like that.
Yeah, it's about a 9-point spread.
And then Keith Swinton, who I don't think really campaigned at all. Yeah. He actually ran for that 4 years ago too. He got like 12%.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't know that that's that surprising because, people, even in a Republican primary, most people don't know who any of those people are.
What I'm getting at in there is the traditional thing is you do win by about 2/3. You get about 2/3 of the vote, unless there's a reason that you made some people mad or dissatisfied. I'm trying to figure out what. Leslie Osborne.
Leslie Osborne is somewhat of a controversial figure among the hardline Republicans. I mean, Leslie's story is she was elected to the legislature as pretty much a hardline Republican. And then they made her the chairman of the budget committee. Well, when she started getting into the budget and found out, this is the money and this is what it takes to run the state.
During the toughest time financially.
And during the toughest time, she really, started to sort of alter her thinking on some things. And she's just, so I don't know if you know Leslie or not. She's really kind of a no BS kind of a person.
She's very outspoken, isn't she?
She's outspoken.
She can say what she thinks without thinking.
Well, she can, or she can, I mean, I've just seen her kind of say, well, I don't give a crap. And this is what I think. And so, some people like that and some people don't like what she has to say. And then, frankly, some people are fans of Sean Roberts and some people are not fans of Sean Roberts. Yep. And so, but the fact that he has some name recognition.
Well, remember, we were talking earlier about the bloodletting that happened in the primaries 4 years ago with the platform caucus, where 8 of them got bumped out. And I think the only guy who eked through was Sean Roberts.
That's right. Sean managed to win and
close.
It was very
one of your former colleagues ran against
right. He lost to a fairly liberal opponent in the Republican primary.
That was Randy Krehbiel called her liberal.
I said relatively liberal. I didn't say I said she was fairly liberal.
Yeah.
I am going to ding a little ding because we're getting too deep into the.
You're right. We are.
And people, we're going to lose our audience here. Let's move along here to some of the others.
Okay. But anyway, so that's what's coming up in the runoff is you're going to have that second district and then, this labor commissioner and then local races.
I think there's 11 legislative races still.
Yeah.
And some of those now, I think the only ones we have around here are for House District 66, which is and it's been redrawn pretty dramatically. So it's Sand Springs and Skiatook and then kind of an arc through southwest Osage County.
Yeah.
So when they moved District 36, which was Sean Roberts' district still, I guess.
Generally in a little bit of, Nadine's, J.D. Nolan.
Right. So 66 was J.D. Nolan's district.
Yeah.
So they moved 36 to eastern Oklahoma County.
Yeah.
And so then they basically they combined, the core Sand Springs area that was in District 66 before whatever, which is has been represented by J.D. Nolan for 12 years. And then they added part of what had been Sean Roberts' district. So it went from being a Sand Springs kind of, I'm actually in District 66.
My son lives in Berry Hill area, Prattville.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, and I live just south of downtown Tulsa. So they took out they took out most of the Tulsa area, which was really most of the Democrat votes in that district, and then combined it with some of what Sean Roberts had.
Yeah, so let's go to these upsets in the primary, because I believe that redistricting, especially Logan Phillips, south in his strength had been down Okemah, that part of Okmulgee County, and they pretty much moved him into Tulsa County.
Right. Yeah.
And then I think, was it a Bixby guy just trounced him? Yeah,
so Logan Phillips got probably the worst of the redistricting of anybody, because, he's from Mounds, and his district used to run long north and south. It went from, basically the Okmulgee, Tulsa County line, and then Mounds, which is actually, I think, in the corner of Creek County.
Yeah.
And then it ran all the way down to the Canadian River in Hughes County. So it was long north and south. When they redistricted that, and again, this comes back, there's all sorts of, they say there's no politics in redistricting, but I don't believe it. But so what happened is that when the numbers came out on Tulsa Metro, it had grown a lot more than they thought. And they'd taken District 36 and moved it to Oklahoma City. Well, guess what? They still had more people. So they had to, one of the things they did was cut off District 24 and move it over to Bixby and Glenpool. So he had almost.
Who served that office, 24?
That was Logan Phillips.
Logan,
yeah. Okay. And so that went from being a rural district to being a suburban district. And he had almost an entirely new constituency that he had to try and sell himself to. And there was there was something like $250,000 in dark money went into that race. And most of it was either for or against Logan Phillips.
Yeah. Now, 4 years ago, he'd done amazing things. He defeated the Democrat leader of the House at that time, Steve Copeland, with not raising a single penny.
Right.
He was my poster boy to knock down the narrative of, I couldn't win because I didn't have enough money.
Well, he had several things going against him. One was the redistricting. One was he was targeted by the school choice people because he was not going to go along with the Senate's voucher plan. And then he made I think he probably made some big business types upset because he had been involved in data privacy, trying to pass some data privacy laws.
Sure.
And a lot of the telecommunications people don't like that.
Yeah.
And then he also was involved in trying to stop robocalls.
Yeah.
And they actually got something passed on that. Now, what the state can do is pretty limited.
Yeah.
But especially the data privacy, there was a lot of pressure to block that, which they did.
Yeah. Okay, so he lost. Then Jake Merrick over in the Senate. Now, he won in a special election.
Right.
And there again, special elections are whole different dynamics. And now all of a sudden you got a general election. Yeah.
If I can we move to some of the more well-recognized?
Yeah, you're right.
Because our audience probably.
You're right. We're getting too far into the weeds.
Yeah.
If this was a 3-hour show, we might go into that.
Let's get to the Secretary of Education. Some of the bigger.
Let's go to that because that's
things.
A big one.
Yeah.
That Secretary of Education, Ryan Walters, ended up in the low 40s and about 7 points or so behind, or 8 is April Grace.
Yeah, I think she's more like 10.
10 points behind.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic there. And of course, Ryan Walters is endorsed. I can't remember a governor ever coming in and having like his own ticket.
Yeah.
You know, he's got O'Connor, he's got Ryan Walters, he's got Sean Roberts. I think that's it. But, so, you know, the governor is all behind Ryan Walters, and Ryan Walters is getting money from the Betsy DeVos group and people like that. And then you have April Grace, who is the superintendent of Shawnee Public Schools and, has been, in education, I don't know, probably 40 years.
Sure. Yeah, it's a career.
She was formerly, like the assistant superintendent at Putnam City in Oklahoma City for 7 or 8 years. So she's got a lot of administrative experience. And there's just a lot of contrast there. You've got, someone who's really, spent their life in a long time in public education and is pretty much committed to that. And then you've got a young guy who,
very much a reform message coming from him.
Yeah, there is. The criticism of him, is that he has no administrative experience. He really hasn't ever been in the classroom very much. He was a teacher in McAllister. I say that. I mean, he has taught some, and but he's never really. Well, he has no administrative experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did he go to ORU?
No, I don't think so. Okay. But I can't tell you where he did go to school.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons that we had him in here. Mm-hmm. He spent time with
John Cox.
And John Cox. But Ryan was in, and we loved Ryan. I mean, we thought he was great. I personally supported and endorsed John Cox. And for the reason that you just mentioned, that the governor's ticket, I just did not feel it was good to have the governor have
the full slate.
Full slate
I
like
understand
that.
What you're saying.
So I preferred, because if you took Ryan and John, there's a hair's breadth difference between the two because they're very close in their approach to things. The difference to me in John Cox was his administrative experience. He was a principal, a superintendent. He's had all of this classroom. He's had a long, lengthy, plus he was a Democrat, so he knows both sides of everything. Mm-hmm. So he was the guy that I personally, and he's run he ran before as a Democrat.
Twice.
So, yeah, twice actually. And so he was the one that I was supporting as opposed to Ryan, even though I think Ryan will make a great secretary. Okay. Having said that now, I don't know anything about April, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
Right.
Because what I'm afraid of is ending up with another Joy Hoffmeister, which is a nightmare. So I don't know what April Grace is going to be like.
You're seeing our bias.
Yeah,
now,
right.
Okay?
Well, yeah. I mean, it kind of depends on what you want and what you, I think, so the critique of April Grace is, just as you said, I think she's very well known among educators. She's raised a lot of money from educators. She's actually raised,
which is worrisome.
She's actually, well, but so there's two ways of I understand what you're saying, but on the other hand, if you're going to have your car worked on, do you want it worked on by somebody who knows how to fix cars, or do you want to, just pull a guy off the street and do it? And I shouldn't put it that way.
Because, you could have the mechanics union, or you could have the mechanic who is non-union. You know what I'm saying? To me, to say that she's supported just because she's supported by educators, Joy Hoffmeister was supported by the educators.
Well, actually the educators were not keen on Joy Hoffmeister when she came in because she ran that private tutoring.
Right.
The administrators funded her. You remember the indictment that Prater ended up having to pull?
Right. Well, but I think a lot of the classroom, you have to keep in mind, well, first of all, we talk about teachers unions. The teachers unions in Oklahoma are extremely weak. I mean, this is not like it is in New York or someplace. The teachers unions are really, if the teachers unions were any good, we wouldn't be near the bottom in teacher pay and things like that. But you do have these cadres of educators. And in a lot of cases, they're sort of organized, if you can call it that, informally. Mm-hmm. And, you have the OEA, but a lot of teachers don't belong to the OEA. Sure. I dare say there are more teachers who are registered Republicans, and
I think you're right.
Teachers tend to be just people in the community.
So
they're not aliens who are beamed into the community.
I think you'll agree with this: is if you want the current system run well, you're probably an April Grace person. But if you want pretty significant structural reform of public education, common ed,
I would agree.
Then you're probably Ryan.
Yeah. So the criticism I hear of Ryan Walters is that he spends too much time driving around in his car making videos and writing letters creating problems that don't exist. Now, whether that's a valid criticism or not, everybody will have to make their own decision.
I've never seen a slicker politician than Ryan. His people skills. He came in here and he flattered us for the first 5 minutes before we got into the show.
Yeah.
He knows how to warm up a crowd to him. Yeah. And I want to say this about all of them in that race. I saw several forums. I've never seen a more collegial, very polite group like that. I wish O'Connor and Drummond would take an open, because they got nasty. Mm-hmm. All three of these major candidates there, they were fantastic in how they treat each other.
Yeah, and you've got different requirements, or I don't know if requirement. So with the state superintendent, you basically have 3 teachers in the room, mm-hmm. Who are used to saying, "Quiet, children, quiet." and with O'Connor and Drummond, you've got 2 lawyers who, spend their days arguing.
Yeah, accusing.
And then on top of that, you've got, with Gintner, he's a former fighter pilot. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know Gintner, but he's a pretty aggressive guy.
Yes, he is. Ambitious.
And that race presented, and I'm not trying to get us off topic, but that race I thought was actually the most interesting of all the primary races.
Let's go to that one then. I discuss the other one.
And I actually thought John O'Connor would probably win, but, it was very close. But that was such a contrast because on the one hand, you've got, John O'Connor closely tied to the governor, kind of a laid back guy.
Yeah, no political experience.
No political experience. He comes from a corporate, a civil lawsuit. Mm-hmm. Or law background more than he's done some criminal law, but not a lot, not very much. And then on the other hand, you've got Gintner Drummond, who's this aggressive fighter pilot, kind of tear down the door. We started a bank or bought a bank. He's got all these different enterprises going, and they just and very independent. And so they presented an interesting contrast in candidates.
To me, the difference and what ended up making the difference in the race was that commercial with the sheriffs.
Yeah,
that's what did it. I know, and that was smart when he got those 4 sheriffs to endorse him. You know which one I'm talking about?
I didn't see it, but
you didn't see it? Yeah.
I think Regalado was one.
Yeah, Regalado was in it. Yeah, there were four sheriffs, and there's still something about law enforcement endorsement that helps. And he didn't.
Interesting, Fount Holland was the campaign coordinator on there, and Fount's got quite a legendary history. But Vic Regalado was one of his former clients running in that. And sometimes you got that fraternity of we're all Fount Holland people or Holly Gerard people or Tomahawk people. And it's cliquish a little bit.
It can be. It can also get very twisted and confusing because just because they're on your side this time, They may not be the next time.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to get too far into this, but you remember in the 80s when the Democrats were just a huge powerhouse. And then you had cliques within the Democrat Party taking each other down.
Oh, yeah.
I remember one in 94, a candidate over there in Muskogee pulled a shotgun on his opponent. In the middle of the night.
Yeah, real.
Putting out yard signs on night of election.
So I guess I'm kind of cynical about some of this stuff, but don't get me wrong, there are differences between Republicans and Democrats, but they're all human beings, and they're all subject to the same human nature. And so, whenever you get in a majority, then it gets harder and harder to hold all of that together because everybody thinks they ought to be the ones in charge.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. I think the Republicans are now in a place that the Democrats were in the 80s and maybe into the 90s. And my biggest concern with the Republicans is that corruption could take it all down like it did the Democrats.
Well, that's the other thing about being in the majority is that when you're in the majority, then you have what I would call opportunists coming in. They're not only joining the majority, but they may not be joining the majority party because they believe in the basic ideology. They want to be part of the majority because they want stuff.
Joy Hoffmeister.
I think with Joy.
Not anymore. She's going the other way.
Well, no, I know.
But it was an easy record. She didn't want to, she didn't want to take on, Governor Stitt in a primary.
That was Barisi back in the day.
Yeah, that's exactly
initially.
it.
I mean, so Joy Hoffmeister, is a lifelong Republican. I mean, Joy Hoffmeister is a lot like the Republicans I knew growing up.
She grew up part of the Easley family. Mary Easley, Kevin Easley, staunch Democrat leaders, especially on the education issues.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, I've gotten off the subject here, but so
get it on, guys.
No, I'm just saying. No, what I'm saying is that so her interest was education, but you have people who are coming in because they want a contract or they want to do something for this sector of the economy or that sector with the expectation that it's going to benefit them. And you see that all the time in the legislature and even, in party stuff, because if you want to get something done in Oklahoma these days, you really have to be a Republican.
Yeah. Unless it's local or county politics in Cole County or something like that,
Well, you're right.
Well, even in national politics, you see it. We see it on the federal level. We see it in Congress. You've got people that, let's take a Liz Cheney, for example, even, there's nothing really Republican about her anymore.
Not seen it.
Adam Kinzinger, there are different ones. We call them rhinos.
Yeah.
Republican in name only. And there are those. There are dinos as well.
Yeah, and some of it, as issues change, all of a sudden the contrast shows up that might not have been
right.
there.
Well, yeah, but what you had as Republicans say in the 80s, 90s, and so forth are not the same today.
Yeah, like we're not, we have no appetite.
And the parties have changed.
Right
the parties have changed. I mean, we had the Democrats of the pre-1965 or pre-70 Democrats are not the Democrats of today. The Republicans, the pre-70 Republicans are not the same. Different issues became primary issues and then they've switched again, I think, since the 90s. So, things are always changing and you have to keep up with it that's what makes it so hard for the voter. Don't you think, Randy? I mean, to keep up with what the core values and the platforms, they don't even believe in the platform. In fact, I bet if you took the people in Oklahoma City, our legislators, and you quizzed them on the platform.
The Republican Party platform?
Yeah. And the Democrat platform.
Well, yeah.
I bet you they wouldn't be able to know what's in the platform.
So elected officials hate platforms. Of course. Because it puts them in a box.
Why did they get rid of the platform caucus people?
Well, but when you get into a legislative body, all of a sudden, there are practical aspects of that. Are you going to do a little bit or are you going to do nothing? Mm-hmm. And, because holding out for 100%, you may get there eventually. And what you find, for instance, in the Oklahoma legislature or even in Congress, it takes years and years and years usually to get where you want to be. I mean, so look what's happened for the people who have opposed, abortion rights. Mm-hmm. It's taken them 50 years. I know people don't want to hear it, but that's usually the way these things work. You have to, I come to you with an idea and it sounds crazy. So it takes me but maybe there's some kernel in there that is worthwhile.
Yeah. Slavery
and so
took 90 years to get rid of.
Longer than that. I mean, from nationhood.
Well, from 76 to 65.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, so you have to normalize whatever it is you're proposing, whatever crazy idea it is, you have to convince people it's not as crazy, but then the idea is also refined. What you started out with may not be what you wind up with. I mean, it may achieve your overall goal, so people change. I mean, I've changed over the course of my life. Eddie was telling me earlier how much he's changed over the course of his life. So people change, and through their association with other people, they change institutions like political parties.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that because it reminds me of Mark Wayne Mullen's thoughts and ideas and his foundational thought of the 70-30% on any issue.
Right.
That if he can get 70%, he'll take it. And so many of our staunch conservatives, it's 100% or nothing.
And it's that way on the other extreme too.
Right. Yeah. And the problem with that is that too often we get the nothing and you lose everything. Whereas the smart, this is why I think on the liberal side, they've been so successful because they'll take even 50% because the next time they'll get their other 50% and they'll keep, incrementally getting their things. And as you said, if you take the incremental approach in 50 years, in 100 years, you'll probably end up where you want to be because things will change. Because once you get people adapted to this, then you can push them a little further, you can ask for 100. And if they give you 50, you've got half of what you want. Then you ask for 100 again and you get 50 again. This is something that I've come to see over the years, and a lot of people just can't get that in their minds, and it's, I want it all and I want it now. And if I don't get it now, I'm not taking anything. And then so you end up with nothing and the other side gets everything. And that's just a losing proposition.
I was so disappointed at times with Katie Hankey. On a personal level, she and Frazier I always liked, but she was my state rep. And she voted, in a way that I, as a more conservative, I would say, wasn't really happy with. Well, as soon as she stepped aside, I get Denise Brewer, who was, I went from half a loaf to no loaf. And that's what taught me that lesson firsthand. I've got to be willing to accept, because you know what? My district is overwhelmingly Democrat. And I was hanging on to a Republican, but not 100% platform Republican. And that's, to me, the lesson Republicans need to learn.
What about the Cindy Byrd race?
That was an interesting race. And
she won overwhelmingly.
And I think she did win. Well, I think it was that, 70-30 or 2/3.
Right.
And that, McQuillan didn't really have much money other than there were some dark money groups. Those are called independent expenditures. Mm-hmm. By law, the candidate can't know anything about strategy or do any.
By the way, that was for which office?
Oh, for state auditor.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Just so that we let people know.
Yes, you're right.
Names out there now.
We've got to do that. So, And it really largely came down to, what was your view on Epic? Because that's where she took the most heat in the Republican Party. Because a lot of Republicans are pro-education reform, charter schools, things like that, which Epic seemed to be the model that was, it became the largest school district in Oklahoma.
Right.
And even without COVID, it was still on a track that within the next 3-4 years it would be. It's growing that big.
Well, COVID, it actually grew during COVID.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That just accelerated.
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
But I'm saying it was going to get there anyway on the track it was. And, but, now there's some indictments. They've been investigating them for the last 10 years every year. Never got a grand jury indictment. And now we've got a, district attorney, lame duck district attorney, you might say, who decided, okay, I'm going to pull the trigger and I'm going to charge them. And so we'll see. I talked to some.
It could be like, the Trump one after. As they say, you can get a ham sandwich indicted.
Yeah, I've read the charging documents. I think those guys, and now the IRS is after them.
Well, the charging documents. But Randy, I've seen things in the Tulsa World that was a narrative that had to do with federal education things. And I was trying to get Freedom of Information stuff from the school district because I think Tulsa Public Schools was feeding it. Ends up, Tulsa Public Schools was found guilty of the very thing that Epic was being charged with. It had to do with federal money for kids with disabilities.
Okay. So you'd lost me there for a minute.
Yeah.
So Tulsa Public Schools now that's not really what Epic is charged with.
No. But I'm saying that's just the narrative. It seems like the last 8 years, there's always been a whisper campaign, but there was never an indictment.
Well, and that's, so it depends on who you want to listen to on that. So on the one hand, there's the story kind of that you've laid out that it's trumped up. On the other hand, there's the story that they weren't indicted because they spread so much money around that everybody was afraid of them. And the reason that wound up with the Oklahoma County attorney is because
the Attorney General
yes. would not handle that. And actually, so this last time around, as I understand it, and I think there's, this makes some sense, is that when John O'Connor came in, he said to David Prater, I don't really know anything about this. You've been working on it. Why don't you take it back?
Right.
And so, and to me, just kind of as an outsider, that made some sense. Now I would say, that Epic should not be viewed as typical of charter schools.
That's correct.
Because most charter schools are fairly small. Mm-hmm. They're in neighborhoods or, in other words, they're brick and mortar schools. Mm-hmm. They're not really, empire building, if you will.
Right. Well, we've got about 5 that are statewide virtual charters now.
Right. And that is a distinction. There's virtual charter schools and then there's just, brick and mortar charter schools. Yeah. So, but there are other, charter schools. Now and we'll see how this turns out. I would say, our experience with COVID, I'll be interested to see how our experience with COVID affects the virtual charter schools, mm-hmm. because now we're hearing kids need to be in a classroom. And so I don't know how that's going to affect these. My sort of instinct is there are some kids who are going to do well in that environment and some kids who are not.
Right.
It's not for everybody.
And my thing is, whatever gives parents, families, the most options. When you got a kid who's getting bullied at the bus stop and nobody's doing anything about it, you just keep them at home and you go virtual. If you got, a kid, I was talking to a school board member, Shoto Macy, last year, and he didn't like Epic. There's a lot of things he was worried about all these reforms, which, by the way, Ryan Walters was pretty much a point man at school reform. Probably the most significant school reforms that we've seen in the legislature were a couple of years ago or last year, and Ryan was kind of the point guy from what I can tell. But I'm getting off of my topic here. My topic is, I talked to this guy, I said, so what is Shoto going to do with their online learning? Oh, we'll probably just get rid of it. And I said, no, keep it.
Yeah, I
said, one, there's no reason you can't compete with Epic and go statewide yourself. I said, number one. And I said, and number two, you got a kid acting up on campus. You don't suspend him. You move him over to virtual and he learns from home. It ought to be a privilege to be on campus that you get by continuing to behave.
Yeah, one of the criticisms of a lot of the, probably 99% of the traditional public schools is that they have not developed their online programs. And even when they haven't, advertised them if they, or promoted them.
Right.
So anyway, I know we've gotten way off from the election. I'm sorry about that.
So that's the auditor's thing was very much about that, which kind of goes back to the education thing. Eddie, what else you got?
What I'd like to do, let's look forward now.
Yeah.
These runoffs.
Yeah.
So, we have 2nd District runoff.
Yeah.
Braheen and, what is it?
Avery Fricks.
Fricks.
Yep.
Your predictions.
So I think there's going to be a lot of money in that. I mean, there was something like 1.3 million in dark money in that, and like 2/3 of it was either for or against Braheen. So he's going to be the lightning rod. He was getting a lot of money from Club for Growth. And then there was another group that was it's called something like Fund for a Working Congress that was going after him. And so that, I mean, I would think in a race like that, anything that gets your name out there is helpful, you know, and especially if it gets his name out north of I-40, but we'll see. Fricks is a really young guy. I think he's like 26 or 28.
He's got cute dimples.
Oh.
You know, David, I don't notice that sort of thing. But you know, he's a young guy and he's got a certain amount of, I guess, charisma. I think there's some family money there. Mm-hmm. So, I sort of think he'll win because he's north of I-40.
Is that where the numbers are?
Yeah, that's where the numbers are. But, you know, in this day and age, boy, it's hard to say. And, you know, Josh Braheen has been around a long time. He's a young guy, but he's been around a long time. He worked for, Senator Coburn. Mm-hmm. And then he was in the state Senate for 8 years.
And that amazed people that he won that Senate seat.
When he first ran, I think it did. Yeah. You know, and I think up until that time, that had always been a Democrat seat.
Yeah.
And so he was part of that big, you know, turnover again in Little Dixie where it went from being, you know, this traditional
Tea Party.
Yeah.
Thing.
Let me ask this question. I mean, imagine this question. Does anybody know anything about Frick's actual political positions?
Well, I know what he did in the legislature. He's been in the legislature for, I think it's 6 years. And so he was big on transportation. You know, he's been trying to tell people, well, it's true. I mean, he got the Donald Trump Highway designated. Now,
is that him?
That was
a few different people tried.
Yeah. So his name is on there. And then I think there's a guy in the Senate. And,
Marty Quinn, I think.
Marty, well, you know, the first time they tried to do it, Nathan Dahm was involved.
Yes. Yep.
And they wanted to put it in northeastern Oklahoma and that was, they wanted to make part of Route 66, the Donald Trump Highway, and the tourism people did not want that. But anyway, so he, you know, transportation was very big for him in the legislature. He was chairman of the Transportation Committee. And then he also, he was very involved in pensions, and he pushed very hard to get cost of living increases for people on state pensions.
Yeah.
And, you know, some conservatives liked that and some conservatives didn't like that. They had not had a cost of living increase in 10 years. So,
okay. So let's go back to 2017.
So he has been active. He has been active in the state house. So he's not just a
I want to add
deadhead.
another thing to that. 2017-18, toughest budget years. Tax increases being pitched. Mm-hmm. Fricks, I think, voted for all of them.
I think he probably did.
And I think Braheen voted against all of them.
I believe that is correct.
Yeah. So that's a big if that's your issue, that's a real comparison.
Well, and I think even among Republicans, there's going to be disagreements about whether that was a good thing or a bad thing.
Exactly.
But that gives you an idea of something to, base a decision on.
Yeah, because ultimately they passed because they got 3/4 of both
Correct.
houses. So, yeah, it is a Republican leadership thing anyway. But, so anyway, and the numbers will be down, and we still have no polling. There probably will be. Somebody will poll it. I mean a legitimate,
right,
I don't mean a campaign poll.
Yeah, right.
So that'll be interesting. And then I don't know if the tribes are going to get
involved.
Because I would think if you're Cherokee, you feel like, okay, we can, got connection with Fricks, and you're Choctaw, like, okay, Burkeen, he's down here, he knows us.
I don't know what Burkeen's relationship with the tribes are, and I don't, for that matter, I don't know what Fricks's are. And you are right, that is interesting to see if they get involved, except they may get involved and we never know.
Yes.
Yeah. They may get involved and we never, okay. I mean, we might suspect it, but we might not ever know for sure.
Okay, so I gotta get into, yes.
All right. No, very good. This is good. This is good stuff. What about the Senate?
No, if you could just.
All right.
I want to get into, okay, let's go to the Senate.
Let's go to the Senate. I want to get
into dark money.
Yeah, because it's going to affect all of it.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So, that Senate race.
Mm-hmm. The runoff?
The runoff.
Mullen and TW.
You're asking about the Democratic Senate runoff and for that one seat, right?
No. Yeah.
Yeah, Mullen and TW Shannon. It's sort of interesting to me that, Marquee Mullen just, came out of the chute like a house on fire and, almost, well, I say almost, I mean, he got up in the mid 40s. Mm-hmm. I forget. At one point he was at 45. I think he finished at 43 or 44. Mm-hmm. And, so, I think at some point people narrowed it down to those two. And even if they may have liked one of the other people, I don't think anybody else got into double digits. Because Luke Holland and Dom.
Okay, so this is what I want to get into. If you're a Luke Holland supporter or a Nathan Dom supporter, who are you likely to flip to?
Well, that's a hard question.
I can answer it.
Okay.
Luke Holland supporters are going to go for Mullen.
Yeah. I think Nathan is too.
Because of Inhofe. Mm-hmm. Okay, Inhofe would be a Mullen supporter because I think Inhofe actually supported Mullen initially.
That was my narrative when Inhofe ran. Was it 2 years ago for re-election? Mm-hmm. I was questioning his age and is he fit?
But I mean, for Congress, even way back when he was running for Congress.
I said 2 years ago, I said if Inhofe doesn't file for re-election, I think he's going to tap Mark Wayne because he had always been talking big about Mark Wayne. Inhofe had. Mm-hmm. Around at least what I had heard.
Right.
So I do think at this point you're likely to see Mark Wayne get at least 60-40 is what I'm going to project.
I would, when you've got that big of a lead going into the general election.
Well, runoff.
Into the runoff election, you generally win. I mean, it's not impossible for TW to catch up, but he would have to get, so for him to win, he'd have to get almost every vote that the other guys got. For
Mullen to lose, he'd have to become Vince Orza, who's famous for doing both. If you're an old hack like us, because he ran for governor once as a Democrat, won the primary, lost the runoff, and before that as a Republican, won the primary, lost the runoff.
Yeah, he was the all-time runoff loser.
What I've seen as far as Mullen, there are not anyone I've spoken to there that would not vote for Mark Wayne. It's never for TW. It's an anti-Mullen vote. Mm. And it all goes back to the Ashley Babbitt situation.
That's the one dark area.
That's the one issue that, but when
sorry, is that racist for me to call it a dark area?
That's funny. But that is the one simple thing. Other than that, it used to be the breaking the pledge, the term limits thing. That's gone now. But what I think Mark Wayne needs to do is get his former adversary, what's his name? I can't think. Jaron, who, by the way, who's also in a runoff, it looks like. Jaron Jackson, have Jaron come out and support him and get with him, to work some things. But other than that, I don't know of anybody that's really for TW, cause we have a get together every month with different people, and I met several people, and it's the same thing. Nobody really is for TW. It's more of an anti.
I think if you get around Oklahoma City and down towards Lawton, TW has more.
The Chickasaws. Yes.
Yeah, and the Chickasaws, he's very. It's kind of an interesting deal. I hope I'm not misremembering this, but at one point when he was speaker, he told one of our folks that he always, when he was growing up, they thought of themselves as more Chickasaw than African American. So he is pretty, ingrained in that.
Oh, no, I know that. Yeah, he is.
He told me
he runs a Chickasaw bank. I mean, that's the bank.
Right.
Bank
last year, I ran into him at the Capitol, and I said, "Are you Chickasaw Freedman?" He says, "Actually, I have Indian blood in me and Freedman blood in me, both." Mm-hmm. So
yeah, no, that's for sure. He very highly holds that Chickasaw.
Oh yeah,
heritage in him. So, which is a whole other discussion, how the Chickasaw handled their freedmen versus the Cherokee and some of the others. But what I'm saying is, so Mark Wayne, I think Mark Wayne will pull it out, but I think, he's going to have to do a little bit of work still to win over some of these other people, who, like I said, it's not necessarily a pro TW thing. It would be more of an anti, and it would help a great deal, like you said, to get the Nathan Dom support, to get Nathan to support him, and Luke Holland.
Yeah, and Inhofe.
Yeah, and Inhofe, yeah. If he got those people behind him, then I don't think it would be a big stretch at all.
I mean, I think it's be tough to beat Mark Wayne, and it's interesting. There is a certain amount of charisma about Mark Wayne, and he's got a lot of energy, and I think that attracts people. And even when
he's Oklahoma.
Yeah,
those ads
that's. I hear from a lot of people who say, "Oh, I just cringe every time he says something because it's crazy." And I said, "Yeah, but think about it. Who is better representative of?" Now, I shouldn't say what he says is crazy. I mean, sometimes I'll admit, it's like anybody else, sometimes, okay, you kind of roll your eyes, but I think he's represented his district pretty well.
And more so once he quit being Boehner's, part of his team. Early on, I felt like he was just carrying the water because Boehner made him an assistant whip. Just about right there. And it just seemed like the last 4 years or so, 4 or 6 years, he's done a better job, in my opinion. I'm just giving you my perspective.
Here's the thing about that district, and I don't know how that translates to the statewide. I think there is a certain amount of it. So that district, we hate the government. Mm-hmm. We hate the federal government. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people in that district depend on the federal government. Yeah. And even, this is something it's both a philosophical and a practical matter for the whole state. Okay. So we don't like the federal government. And I understand that because, we don't like people hanging over us, and we like to think that we're independent and self-sufficient and all that stuff. But what would happen if they closed down Tinker Air Force Base or Fort Sill or Vance Air Force Base?
And Inhofe worked hard to keep Tinker open. That was always
he worked very hard.
And you go back to that Little Dixie area, Wes Watkins, I ran into him a few years ago, and Wes was always big on whatever brought federal jobs or federal money, because that 3rd district's poor. There's not jobs there like there needs to. It's beautiful, but it's poor.
And I think Mark Wayne has done a good job, and somewhat quietly, of going about trying to do things to improve healthcare access and infrastructure, especially like internet access, broadband access. Supposedly that district has like the worst broadband access of any congressional district in the country. I don't know how it could be worse than Alaska, but anyway, it's supposed to be, it's supposed to be pretty bad. And you're right. There are a lot of low income areas in that. It's a pretty diverse district though, because if you get up in the northern part, if you get around Claremore, well, that's a fairly affluent area.
Urban.
And there are areas around Grand Lake that are fairly affluent. So some of them are very affluent. And so he's had to walk that line of, being conservative, but also serving the needs of his constituents. And I think, that's not an easy thing. I mean, it's not an easy thing being in Congress, to be honest.
Yeah, and he's done a great job with it. And, another thing that just hit me, I mean, think about it. He has 3 of the tribes in his district. He's got the Choctaw, the Cherokee, and the Creek.
Plus the 2 dozen up in the
he's really got more than that, because he's got, 6 or 8 or something in Ottawa County. So
right, but the what they call them, the civilized tribes,
the special tribes.
We won't speak of the uncivilized.
No, I've got a lot of respect for those 5 tribes and what they've accomplished. Because I come from Minnesota, where it was the Dakota and the Ojibwe, which never stop relying on federal money on a very family level, and the poverty that you would see.
I don't know. So I don't know enough about the reservation situation. I think a lot of the Indians in up north still live on reservations, but they get segregated or whatever you want to call it, and
I'm just saying, if these are 5 reservations in eastern Oklahoma, they are the wealthiest reservations I know of.
Well, I know in New Mexico, I still go through there when I go down to Texas, to El Paso, and I go through, and some of those, I don't know what they're doing with the casino money, but it doesn't seem to be trickling down. Some of the, and I watch some of these programs, you go out to New Mexico and, particularly in New Mexico, I don't know what's going on, like the Navajo and some of the Apache. Well, I don't know what's going on with.
Well, for one thing, they're in some of the worst land in the United States.
Oh, that's right. We have all the oil and minerals here, don't we?
Well, I mean, that's part of it. We've got farmland and all of that stuff. So.
Yeah, but when they decided to make what we now call Oklahoma Indian Territory, Lewis and Clark had gone through here, and I've read the stories that some in Pike, they thought this was the most godforsaken land there was.
Well, sure.
And that's why they gave it to the Indians. Nobody else wanted.
Well, they hadn't seen New Mexico.
Just
and don't get me wrong. I want to hasten to say New Mexico and Arizona are beautiful, but it's difficult to make a living as a farmer or a herder on some of that land.
Just because it's a beautiful sunset doesn't mean it's productive land.
We're right. Now, exactly.
You're native. What tribe are you?
No, I'm not.
You're not?
No.
Your kids.
Oh, your
mother,
kids. That's right.
Yeah, my kids belong to the Cherokee Nation, and they're involved in that to some extent. But no, I'm not.
So what I want to get into is we've seen dark money. I want to start it out with all of the money that came to not promoting a candidate, but just ripping on stick.
Right.
That started last winter.
Yeah, right.
And I like to think, anybody with sense is going to hold most of their powder dry for October. So if we've seen $1 million spent now against it, what are we going to see in October?
So some people, dark money is not always reported. Some people think that there's already been $7 or $8 million spent.
I would believe
that. Well, I was reading,
him.
There's an article out of Oklahoma City, I want to say that $10 million they've received $10 million.
Well, so that one PAC has said they were prepared to spend $10 million. And that's an example of, we can't say with certainty where that money is coming from. Now, people have ideas about it, but my guess is that it's actually coming from more than one direction. There may be one or two sources that are.
Well, I've heard there are 3 PACs, separate PACs so far.
There's at least that.
Yeah.
And so for the governor's race, there was 1.7 million or 1.7, almost 1.75, I think, in dark money. And some of that was attributed or was listed as being for the support of Joel Kinsel. A lot of it was, but basically it's just, I mean, that was a non-competitive, primary. I think there's probably some business interests that are actually involved in that because for rightly or wrongly, the governor seems to have a talent for getting people mad at him.
Well, and which
is kind of the nature of being a governor, actually. But
primarily, the hit on Stitt from the dark money ads, and mostly it's in commercials, TV commercials, has been about the pardon and parole process and who's going to. And I don't think that issue, because I looked at the real numbers, it's not a big issue, but I think it was the issue they could sell. And so I'm trying to figure out what's their real beef. Yeah. Why is it they really want to get rid of him?
Yeah.
And it might not have anything to do with that.
Yeah, it might not. I mean, that's the thing about, again, part of politics is to get people upset and angry. And so if you don't have a controversy, then you create one.
You need a boogeyman, don't you?
And you create, so we've had that on several fronts, but trying to focus on the governor.
To me,
I don't actually know. I can't say with certainty what exactly that they're, other than it's just an effort, I think, to maybe attack at different angles just to try and weaken him.
That's it. Because it could be an entirely different argument against him.
Well, to me, there are 3 issues.
Yeah.
Okay. One is the casinos. That's one.
Yeah, but you didn't see an ad about that.
No, I know, because that's not a winning issue.
Yeah.
See, they can't win on that issue. Okay, I don't think.
Okay.
The second one is the teachers.
Yeah.
And then the third one is just Democrats want him out. Okay.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 areas that I think, and like you said, those aren't exactly winning issues especially in a primary. But like you said, if you just want to weaken him, you just throw this.
So I would say there's one other developing issue that, I think probably has some validity, and that is the actual management of state government.
Sure, some scandals.
Yeah. So, so for instance, we've got the Swadley's deal,
right,
which is interesting to me on several levels. One of which is, in the big scheme of things, that's actually a fairly small deal. And I think.
And he really didn't have anything to do with it. I mean,
but he's the governor.
Pretty much, right. Well, but he left that up to his lieutenant governor and.
And so that's the point that's going to be made is,
I know.
So, but he appointed all of these guys that are, well, he didn't appoint the lieutenant governor, but he appointed the director of the tourism. And so what they're going to get at is, he appointed the guy there and they kind of screwed it up. He appointed the guy to be in charge, the people to be in charge of the COVID money, and we don't know what happened to all of it.
Yeah.
And actually that's going to be one of the things that I think is going to get, Ryan Walters is going to get hit with, is that he was in charge of some of the COVID money and now they're being investigated by the federal government. Now, are all these things valid? People have to make that decision on their own.
Yeah,
but they are issues.
If my car gets broken into, do I blame the governor because he's the governor?
Well, it depends. Was the governor in charge of the guys who were supposed to watch your car?
Yeah. In a way you could say, well, eventually.
Let me ask you a question. Yeah, you were talking about education.
But to answer your question more fully, does he have anything to do with, for instance, what's going on, or did he have anything? I mean, I'm not even 100% convinced that those guys, that there was anything illegal there. Now,
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think there's a single charge yet.
now I will say this. So this is the thing with me and Swadley's. So you're fixing up all these restaurants and you're trying to get business back into the parks and all of that stuff. And so you want to have these nice restaurants and people are going to come here for conventions and to spend the weekend. But you give the contract to somebody who's not open on Sunday.
Yeah.
I have no problem with people closing on Sunday. Mm-hmm. But if the business model is you're going to build up the business and people wake up on Sunday morning at their lodge or whatever and they got to drive 40 miles to get breakfast, that's a problem.
That's dumb.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing. I wrote a little history article on the Fountainhead Resort, which you've been around long enough to know. And that's the problem when government decides that they're becoming a player, an entrepreneur in some kind of industry like tourism and, and hospitality and that. And I question, should we even be doing that as a state?
Right. Let me ask you on education. One of the big things years ago under Barisi in Oklahoma was number 48 is not good enough or whatever. Do you know where we are now?
Oh, we're about the same.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
See,
it depends on how you measure it and all of that stuff, but
that's
we're
what
not
I would
great.
hang around. I mean, that would be my issue that, she's had however many years as.
Oh, you're talking about Joy
Hoffmeister all this time. And we're either still there or we're worse or whatever. And so to me, that would be the tactic to use to attack that. I would expect the governor to get reelected. I mean, the race is his to lose, but I will say that, so on all of these elections, one of the for the runoffs and everything, one of the central issues is education. Mm-hmm. Probably the central issue is education. And how we go forward. Yeah. And I have to say, I think there's a certain amount of inconsistency all the way around, but, you can only, when you talk about charter schools or private schools, what's the number one, or virtual schools, what's the number one selling point of these? Well, you get personal attention. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the only way to get personal attention is you have to have more personnel. Right.
You have to have more teachers. You have to have more. It's not so much, I don't think, a matter of paying teachers more. It's a matter of having more personnel.
It's when there's competition and they have to earn your patronage.
But here's the thing, David, about that. When you have competition, the idea is you're going to have winners and losers. Mm-hmm. In education, you want everybody to be a winner.
Well, not a failing school district.
No,
school district needs to be knocked down a little. Okay.
But we're talking about the students. We're not talking about the district. So, and you have to ask.
You don't want a school to lose because that means the kids lose.
And here's the thing is that, like with charter schools and all, part of the reason for charter schools was we're going to try different things and see if they work. And if they work, we're going to duplicate it in other places. So in competition, well, if you find a better way to make widgets, you're not going to go around and tell all your competitors how you're making these better widgets.
Well, yes, that's true. I'm going to give you another opportunity here what Minnesota did about 40 years ago. They just did statewide open transfer, mandated by the legislature.
Which we have in Oklahoma now.
Well, yeah, but we don't really see it because no school district has to take anybody.
Well, if they can show that but again, that gets to this point, which is if you've already got, 30 or 40 kids to a class, no, you don't want any more kids.
Right. No, there's always that. But, and by the way, we're not 48th. We are 50th in giving a damn what East Coast liberal think tanks think about us, okay?
Well, one thing, yeah.
Well, and I would agree with you on that. I think that we spend a lot of time, not only on education, but a lot of stuff sort of contemplating, what somebody else thinks.
Yeah.
And
Well,
now Oklahomans are also famous for not giving a damn.
One big thing that I would love to see changed, and that is the way we handle bond money. That bond money can't be used for education. We're totally out of whack. And in other words, bond money is only able to be used for actual facilities.
Correct.
And so, you've got, and this is, I'm going back, say 10 years, okay, or whatever. You've got Jenks building a $20 million aquatic center, Union building $10 million field house and stuff. Booker T, McLean spends, $10-12 million on a new stadium and field house. And our Union's building another, the north end of their stadium is being renovated in Owasso, and each time one builds one, then the other one's got to, and yet, we're complaining about the teachers not getting enough money, or we don't have, like you said.
I think what you're saying is that our tax structure is out of whack.
Thank you. Exactly.
And I think there's something to that.
Yeah. And so we're spending millions, if not billions of dollars on side issues, things like that. And we can't pay teachers. We can't hire enough teachers or pay teachers enough to get the best teachers and the best, and so forth.
Oh yeah, people will vote for bond issue if there's a new football stadium attached to it.
Yeah.
But if it's a new special ed class that's more handicap accessible, or even our state legislature, there's certain things that are shiny new objects, but about rebuilding our mental health infrastructure, to actually have a state hospital so we don't put them all in jails. Now we get on to my hot button issue. But there are certain things that we just don't prioritize because it doesn't get us reelected.
Yeah, and even, and Educare gets all this money, the library, the TCC and the Tulsa Tech. We're building new Tulsa Tech, new community college that nobody, half the classrooms are empty.
Yeah.
But we've got to do something with the money because we've got all this bond money that's built in our
can't
school.
give it back.
No.
Well, the classrooms would probably be full if they had the money for the programming. But the way the tax structure is set up, in many jurisdictions you have, or districts, or however you want to think about it, you have, basically a surplus of building funds.
Right.
And a shortage in operational funds because of the way the tax structure is.
And I'm going to get to it. You cannot use capital gains money for operational expense. That's really...
No, you can't. You cannot use bond issue money for, and I think most people would agree with that because that's basically borrowing money.
So
to run operations. So
let me ask, who would have to be involved in changing? Is that a state, or is that a county,
I think it's even
or is it a city?
Our state constitution.
Well, yeah, it would be a so most of the tax structure is set up state constitution, and there's some statutory, but a lot of it is constitutional. We put everything in the Constitution, and so that makes it hard to change.
The kitchen sink.
But it's we've got this situation where it's really hard to change tax law in Oklahoma. It's fairly easy to cut taxes, but it's hard to really reform taxes. Reform.
Yeah.
It's hard to go in and say, okay, we're gonna, for instance, with sales tax, it's hard to say, well, we're going to expand the sales tax to better reflect the economy of today. In other words, we're going to expand the number of things we tax. But if we do that, we could lower the rate. But it's hard to do that. For one thing, it's sort of like walking off a cliff because you don't know what's going to happen exactly. But it's also hard because, you've got all these 3/4 rules, plus it's not very politically palatable. And
can the legislature do it, or does it have to go on the ballot?
So a sales tax,
I'm talking about the education.
If it's a revenue raising bill, it needs 3/4 of both houses, or it goes to the people.
But some of the millages are in the Constitution.
Yeah.
So some of it would have to go to a vote of the people. Some of it could be done by the legislature. And of course, there are some things you can do locally, but there are limits on it. And so most local school districts are maxed out on their millages. They get all in other words, they get all the property tax money they can get.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm just saying I would say we need to shift it.
Right. I think you're right. I mean, I think again.
And here's why I say that. I used to coach soccer at Union. I was the men's soccer coach. And so I was called in, to the budget meeting. And so I was given orders to come up with, the budget items.
Lots of things we need, right?
Yeah. And then I'm told.
For the next bond issue.
To raise it. There's not enough in here.
Right.
And I'm always the guy trying to,
correct.
Well, we don't need
within
anything.
your means, right?
We don't need anything.
Yeah.
We just got new uniforms and new balls and new nets and this and this. And so I'm saying, well, let's get new nets. And they're talking about, no, they wanted me to build new, stadium seats and build, they wanted me to come up with
That's what sells. Bill Blankenship told me the same thing when he was football coach at Union.
So I don't know, but this is my impression. Again, it's pretty much like what you said. We can't do anything about the tax structure for operations, to pay people.
Yeah.
But we can go out and try and impress people with our facilities, especially if you live in a school district that has a pretty large tax base.
Yeah.
And so, you can't skip, and look, where are the school districts that people want to go? Well, they want to go to the school districts that have the nicest
facilities.
The nicest facilities, right?
Yeah, you're
so,
right.
So the selling point becomes the facilities and not the school.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that's an oversimplification. And I think if you talk to, any school district, well, yes, we're very proud of our academic standard or, our academic achievement. And many of them do very well, but I think you have a point, and one that I've wondered about for a long time is, don't we need a real comprehensive tax reform? And I'm not talking about reducing revenues. I'm not talking about raising revenues. I'm talking about rearranging how we collect the revenues.
Yeah.
Hallelujah and amen, brother. Exactly.
I need to break.
Exactly.
I'm fine.
Okay. I did want to ask you two things that I really want to get into: the Oklahoma impact of the Dobbs v. Jackson, and then just most recently what some people call a scale back of the McGirt rulings, and that I'm hearing from people that on the Dobbs v. Jackson, which reversed Roe versus Wade, that eastern Oklahoma, pardon me?
Oh.
Yeah.
Am I too close or?
No, you kind of bumped there.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
So is that in eastern Oklahoma, there may be a chance that abortion continue regardless of any state law because it's in the land if the abortion provider is tribal.
That's been discussed, and actually that would not have been all that, well, I guess McGirt could have affected it somewhat. But, so the question is, could you put an abortion clinic on trust land or just, on any place in eastern Oklahoma?
Right. Wouldn't have to be trust land.
So my impression is that the tribes don't want to go there. I mean, that they would not be in favor of that. And, that a lot of the tribal people are pretty conservative.
Yeah, they are.
And so, I think that's something that could happen. At this point, I don't know that anybody, again, you never know. I mean, it might only take one abortion provider to say, hey, I'm going to do this, and to heck with what the tribal people want. I mean, that's kind of what happened with McGirt, actually. I know the tribes, came in after McGirt was filed and filed amicus briefs, but it was not a case that was brought by the, and I mean, my feeling on, I don't want to get too far afield, but my feeling is that the tribes felt like they had to get behind it because if it went the other way, they might lose all their sovereignty. So, but I mean, I can't speak for the tribes. So the answer to that part of your question is, yeah, it probably could, somebody could try it.
Yeah,
is anybody going to try it? I don't think the tribes are really.
No, not that maybe they would organize it, but because of the status of things
I mean,
as they are now.
I can almost guarantee you someone will try it.
Some doctor who happens to have some tribal blood could just set up out in the country a little clinic, outpatient, and do abortions.
Yeah, except I don't think it would stay a little clinic very long.
Regardless.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be a big operation, doesn't have to be sanctioned by anybody. They're just going to assert their right. No, you cannot arrest me because I'm a tribal member and this is tribal law.
Yeah, that has actually come up, before, a long time ago, or not a long time ago, but it has come up at various times over the years on some of the, what we think of, I guess you might call traditional reservations, like in Arizona or New Mexico, or I think this particular deal was in one of the Dakotas.
Okay.
And, they just decided that was not something, I mean, the tribes could pass their own laws saying we want it or we don't want it.
That's true.
And I know in the case of the Cherokees, there's been, that was one of Wes No Fire's things, is that he had proposed a tribal bill that they would ban it in whatever their reservation is. They couldn't do it there. So again, I don't know. I think it could happen. But what the outcome would be, I mean, I am not a lawyer, and I'm especially not a tribal lawyer, a tribal lawyer or Indian law.
Regardless of, as the Dobbs v. Jackson ruling that's neither, it's not true that it means nothing, or is it true that it means everything? We're in a process now. Now it just rolls back to who decides. It rolls back to the states. Now I know we've already have trigger laws.
Well, I think it's pretty simple, really. What you're going to see is states that are run by Democrats, essentially.
Leftists, yeah.
Yeah, or leftists. They're going to try to nibble at the edges and see how far they can go in eating away at the new ruling.
Okay. And
those that are conservatively run are going to try to see how strict they can be with it. And that's, and then what's going to happen within those, you're going to have new cases, new suits filed, and New York is already, in fact, let's leave that because basically that's what's going to happen. Yeah. But because I already see where New York, on the other ruling with the guns.
16 states have laws that say, no, it is your right.
Did you say 60?
16.
Okay.
No, I didn't turn Obama on.
No, because under the gun legislation, which is another one that they came out with, New York has already rewritten new rules that they're trying to come through with, which are just as bogus to me. Unconstitutional as the prior ones. Right. The biggest one is that they can look at your social media. Yeah. They can look at your social media and make judgments whether you get a gun license based on your social media.
Yeah, which means your politics.
Yeah, which basically is very unconstitutional. You have no right to look at my personal correspondence to determine whether or not I don't see that anywhere in the Second Amendment, anyway, your thoughts on that? Any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what you're asking me about. If you're asking
no, I'm just making a statement. I mean, we're discussing the fact that yes, the Supreme Court has made these rules. Or basically they've come down with their verdicts on the abortion law, and returned it back to the states. In other words, the states basically can rule on what they want to do.
I would say just in general, I'm uncomfortable with how much we depend on the Supreme Court to make big decisions. I think
we agree.
I think, you know, I just think, and I think Congress, legislatures, school boards, city councils, I think
state legislatures.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
I just think that, you know, if we're a representative democracy, then our representative bodies should be making most of the decisions, and that the courts are there as sort of they're like the parents, I guess. I mean, I hate to say it that way.
Referees.
The parents are, well, I mean, they're there to make sure you don't go too far one way or the other.
Right.
Yes, they protect rights.
And so, you know, I mean, and I realize there's a lot with the case of abortion, I think that I would agree with, I think it was Justice Kavanaugh I think it's a unique situation. Because if you buy the idea that life begins at conception or some very early stage in this process, that means you have two entities occupying the same space. And
eventually we're going to confront that issue, aren't we?
And so that is a whole, you know, that's a pretty difficult, and I would say certainly unusual, if not unique, situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you'll ever totally get rid of abortion because, number one, or at least from the standpoint of criminal law, because it's up to the state to make the case that a law has been broken. And there's a lot of miscarriages happening, and mom doesn't even know she miscarried.
Yeah, well, see, to me, the one amendment that is the most overlooked of any, to me, is the 10th.
Yeah.
The 10th Amendment. So anything that is not expressly given, any right expressly given to the federal government belongs only to the states. And we, like you said, we're giving all of this authority to the federal government that should really be retained by the state. And in this case, the abortion case, they are just giving it back. And same with the gun laws. It should be given to the states. Well, honestly, if New York doesn't want anybody to have a gun, Illinois doesn't want anybody to have a gun, let them.
Oh, no, because you have a expressed right.
Well, that's true. That one is expressed, and you're
again,
right.
So my point was not so much a federal state issue. My point was, I think it is, we should rely as much as possible on our representative democracy. I happen to, you know, think, you know, it's like the old saying, it's the worst form of government in the world except all the others. Yes. You know, I mean, there are a lot of, there are a lot of, problems with the way we do things, but I don't know. I don't know what's better than representative government. So my point was, I just think we ought to rely on our representatives, Eddie, as much as possible.
But I want to question that. Okay, but which representatives then? Your state representatives?
Well, right. I mean, you have to, right, and you have to sort that out.
Right. No, I think Eddie's onto something here. I think we're entering a time, especially with the support of this majority, this court, that you're going to see a scaling back, especially with this EPA ruling. They're doing that. No federal agency, you went beyond your explicit authorization.
But that's not a federal state thing.
No, I know that, but that mirrors the same thing that what Eddie's saying. The 10th Amendment says, hey, if it isn't here in your authorized to the federal government, it belongs to the states.
Well, so, you know, with that, and we're probably getting way off into the weeds, my understanding is, and of course you have all these different tensions within our political framework, and so you have to negotiate. But there is this play between the 10th Amendment and the 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
And so on the one hand, you have people who will argue the 14th Amendment essentially neutralized the 10th Amendment. But then you have people who say, no, the 10th Amendment, the 14th Amendment is very, sort of specific.
Well, I think the 10th Amendment still exists within the confines of the 14th.
Well, I think that's what and again, I'm not a constitutional scholar.
Right.
I'm a newspaper reporter, but my understanding is what you just said is correct.
Yeah. What I want to say here is, EPA happens to be, ironically, that one agency that Nixon helped form in 1970 that is probably the biggest case of mission creep I've ever seen. Because what they were originally founded for and authorized by Congress for was a small fraction of what they've asserted themselves in.
And again, I would say that it is up to Congress
yes.
to do this stuff. And because if Congress doesn't act, that creates a vacuum, and the executive branch and the courts are going to move into that realm.
Right. No,
Yeah,
I agree.
I think that's one of the reasons, and again, we're getting far off our original subject, but I think that's one of the reasons that we've seen some of what we've seen with a lot of stuff, including immigration.
Yeah.
Executive orders,
We get executive orders because Congress can't figure out what it wants to do.
I know, they do things to the executive acts, and then they sue the executive at the courts.
I remember I didn't understand earmarking.
Yeah.
Until I heard Senator Inhofe came in one day to the studio when we were at KFAQ, and he explained what earmarking basically is. That when Congress doesn't specifically appropriate the money for Oklahoma, let's say, then basically it turns it over to the executive branch to do with whatever they want to do with it. Yeah. And so, because you have all these people that are anti-earmarking. Yeah. And if you don't earmark it, then basically it's telling the president that he can do whatever he wants to with that money.
There are earmarks and there are earmarks. Yeah. I mean, so if my feeling, I guess I shouldn't be expressing all my opinions, but this is my understanding, and I'm certainly open to anybody, who would correct me or convince me I'm wrong, but my understanding is, so you have earmarks that are legitimate. I mean, this has been through the legislative process, and we've decided, okay, we want to spend money for this, this, and this. But then you've had earmarks where in the middle of the night, somebody goes in and changes the document, the actual bill, and nobody knows that is in there. There was kind of a famous one that involved a highway in Florida, where they put an off ramp on a highway in Florida, and a legislator happened to own land where that off ramp was going.
I think it was Senator Byrd in West Virginia.
Oh yeah,
he used to do that.
He got a Coast Guard installation.
Well, yeah, but he also had a bridge. He also had a highway or a bridge that never ended or something in West Virginia.
Well, there's a couple. I mean, was there another? Senator Byrd was famous for sort of working the system. But the one they call the Bridge to Nowhere was in Alaska.
Yeah.
Oh,
that was Don Young in Alaska, or Ted Stevens, one of the two.
Randy, I want to say in this disclaimer, the views expressed today by Randy Krehbiel are not necessarily the views of the Tulsa World, but probably should be. Okay.
Well, no, I mean, I often try and keep my,
yes, you do.
My opinions bottled. And so anything I say should be prefaced with, this is the way it seems to me.
And you don't.
But I can be convinced otherwise.
Randy, this in our pre-show.
I'm not a robot.
Our false start of our show today when he didn't hit record. I said, you're to be in a stature all your own in print media in Oklahoma because of that. You don't claim to know it all. You don't seem to have an agenda that's driving you. And you just still remember the old-fashioned rules of journalism and don't claim to know it all because you're learning every day.
Yeah, right. Well, so I would say my only agenda is I try and tell people what's going on.
Yeah.
And I'm only one set of eyes.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm a person, and I don't, So I don't claim to be unbiased in the truest sense of the word, because everybody has their own biases. We're all products of our experiences and our whatever, our brain chemistry or whatever it is. And so when I express an opinion, it's the way it seems to me, but I know that other people have other opinions.
The first step to honesty is admitting that we all have our biases.
Yeah.
And the true mark of an honest person is to say that, I'm prejudiced.
Yeah.
I have biases.
I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about, how you did it. I kind of broke a story a few years ago. The district attorney, if I remember right, from down in Ada, made a charge against the state Department of Transportation that they stole the county's money. And I ran it by you. And, because it was a press statement, right? Mm-hmm. You waited till the next day to get the response from the state. And all of a sudden it brought it into balance. You didn't rush the story until you heard the other side.
Yeah, you try and hear other perspectives as much as you can. There's always, at some point you have to say, okay, we're going to write the story, because you can go back and forth forever.
Yeah, but my story was more sensational than yours.
Well, so that makes it a better story.
Yeah, right. Especially when you become the story, when you find out it was totally bogus.
I had egg on my face because I took that guy's word for it, and he went and got the other side.
Exactly. That's what Randy, that's why he is and has been for all those years still in his job. Yeah. Yep. Hey, I want to wrap up with a couple of things. This is pretty huge, from our side of the fence. Biden official, his name was, Brian Deese, and he actually made, an admission of something that many of us have known forever, and one of the biggest reveals in history, and that is that there is such a thing as the liberal world order. I don't know if you've heard this, but during an appearance on CNN Thursday, National Economic Council Director Brian Deese was asked by anchor Victor Blackwell, what do you say to those families who say, listen, we can't afford $4.85 a gallon for months, if not years. It's just not sustainable. And so Deese's response was, what you heard the president say today was a clear articulation of the stakes. This is about the future of the liberal world order, and we have to stand firm. So this was something that Biden, I don't know if he let it slip or he purposely got it out there, but basically Joe Biden said it and Brian Deese repeated it and quoted it, that essentially this is about the future of the liberal world order. And he said this in Spain the other day, that something that conservatives and certain people have been saying for years, that there is a new world order. And it basically, I think this came about during the Bush administration is when we started seeing this, that there's this new world order.
Or globalism is what it's also
right.
called. Yeah.
And that this whole new world order, it's not just Democrats, it's not just, progressives, that there are Republicans involved. It's just this whole conglomerate of people that are trying to bring in this whole new world order. But it's amazing. It really is amazing that somebody would actually articulate it publicly that they're bringing in a new world order.
You want to wade into that water?
I don't know. I won't avoid it. I guess I will, because by saying I don't know who Brian Deese is, and I don't really know what he's.
He's the National Economic Council Director.
Okay.
Under the Biden administration.
And I don't really know what he's talking about. So
I will say this.
I guess he's talking. I guess in the context he must be talking about energy, or I'd have to know more about what he's talking about.
Let me just say this. Maybe I spoke too quickly, whatever. He was on CNN and he was being asked about the high gas prices.
Yeah.
And basically he was saying that the president articulated earlier in a speech in Spain that day, that this is why we have to get used to paying this high prices for however long it takes. And this is what Biden said, however long it takes. This was what Biden actually told us, that however long it takes. And he was saying that this is about the future of the new world, of the liberal world order, that we have to put up with this.
I don't know. I don't know if he's talking about if he thinks that these prices are temporary and they're caused by the war in Ukraine, so we have to put up with it while that war is going on, or if he means that we have to put up with it because we're transitioning to different energy sources and we're trying to, we want high fuel prices because it's going to cause people to use less fossil fuels.
Or, transfer over to.
That is basically it. That is.
So, I would say this, just in general, it seems to me like we are, and we may have talked about this before, but it seems to me like we are in a very difficult period in our recent history. And I say that because we have all of these things coming into confluence for which there is no good answer. And by good, I mean that, people are going to like. Yeah. So, we can drastically change our energy policy to encourage more oil and gas drilling, because I think, investors in oil and gas right now are thinking, this is a short-term deal, and we don't want to sink our money into a hole in the ground that 10 years from now that there's
they feel like they have a target on their back.
I just think that, right. Or they just think it's not a good investment. So we can change our policy to encourage that investment. And I know, I don't know how you guys feel about it. I'm sure, some of the people who are listening or watching may not like it, but I do think climate change is real, and it has real consequences. And so, but our choices are not good here. We can do nothing and have these high fuel prices, which are a burden on the economy and all of that. We can encourage more production, which would take prices down at least in the short term, but are going to, have costs of various kinds associated with them. We can say, okay, we're going to go to electric right now. But we can't do that because the capacity is just not there. And not only that, but moving to electric, creates another set of problems. Like how do we get the rare earth minerals that we need to produce the batteries? Yeah. Meanwhile, we have these tensions, around the world with, China and Russia and Ukraine. So that's convoluting things. We're coming out of COVID, which seems to have changed, altered things more than people really thought it would. We have all these interruptions in our supply chains.
Yeah.
And we have demographic changes, which I think have contributed to some of the, labor shortages. So we have all of these things coming together and creating turmoil. Yeah. And I don't think there are, easily digestible answers to them.
Yeah. I think what he's saying here is consistent with what Obama said pretty early in his first term when the issue of high fuel prices. He said the problem is that the cost of fuel rose too quickly. It hit the economy hard, put the skids on it, how quickly it rose. And we're seeing a replay of exactly that scenario again here, and to where it's hurting people economically. But long term, anybody who's, in the narrative of, climate change, bringing the necessity to switch over to renewables instead of fossil fuels, they actually see this as an essential part of the strategy, is make it more advantageous to people to switch to green energy.
But see, here's the problem though that I see. and this is here's what bothers me about the statement, the liberal world order.
Yeah, that's a weird term.
Yeah, because.
Yeah, now that thing, that term, I don't.
Yeah, and see, here's why this is weird. Because if you look at it, by our cutting back on our fossil fuel production and our usage, we already had among the world's lowest emissions because of what we've done over the last 40 years, okay? We've already cut our emissions. So what are we doing? We're increasing the production and importation and distribution through the world in Venezuela, in the Middle East, and even Russian. So the pollution planet-wise is, and their fuels are much dirtier than our own, as is China and India. Yet their production is increased. So if you're looking at planetary-wise, the pollution is worse. And France, Germany, Eastern Europe, all of Europe, they're going back to coal. They had gotten off of coal, and they've shut down their nuclear, which is the cleanest of them all, basically. So now they've gone back to coal. So now they're repolluting Europe. I mean, all around, but they're doing it in order, it almost seems, to create this one world government. Because they're trying to take more, because if you look at what's going on or has been going on in Canada, in Australia, and this kumbaya thing that they're doing that you just saw in the NATO summit, and you can tell they're trying really to bring this one world government and this new world order in, and it's kind of scary. And I'm not trying to be, I'm not a conspiracy kind of guy, but if you really look at it, if you look deeply and see what's going on, it's just there. It's just there. And so I really see this liberal world order, and they're trying to create the same type of government in every country now. And the only country that I see standing in the way right now, or there are two. I didn't even realize until this week, if you saw Turkey there, and Brazil. Mm-hmm. But there's Hungary and Brazil are the two that are resisting. One's in South America and one's in Europe.
Russia. They've got their own.
I wouldn't call them.
Yeah, I know. North Korea.
I think there's
capitalistic, free enterprise nations,
right?
But,
market economies.
Yeah.
Well, it's always kind of where do you draw the line between cooperation and unification, if you want to call it that? And I would guess that in most countries there is not. I mean, you cannot impose global government on, I don't think, because there'd just be, people would have to agree to it. It'd be too hard to enforce it, I think. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but that's the way, but I understand your point is that, there's always this push to have, well, our way of doing things is better. No, our way. And you always have to keep in mind, underlying almost everything that happens, power, money, and control.
Yeah. And here's two wild cards, or we would be in a far worse situation on gas prices today. Fracking and horizontal drilling. Because it would not be economically, workable for much of our oil production without those two innovations.
Yeah, and they're kind of fading, is my understanding. Is that that in other words?
Yeah, they're squeezing them. They're squeezing them out.
Well, I don't think it's so much they're squeezing them out as they've discovered that they are not as productive as they thought they were.
I don't know. I mean, the market doesn't lie. Oil really got pretty plentiful over the last 20 years.
But I don't think there are very many now. And understand, horizontal drilling and fracking are not exactly the same thing.
Right.
No, but they're two innovations that really cut the cost and brought up the productivity, the return on investment.
I don't know how much this has to do with regulation and the general climate, but business climate. But so I was talking to a small oil guy, if there is such a thing. And, he was saying, I will never invest in another horizontal well because they cost too much.
Okay.
And I'm not in the business, so I don't know. But my understanding is the return on investment has not been what was promised. And I know, one of those was drilled on my parents' farm. And when it came in, it was a big shot. But within a couple of years, the production had really
And it was
fallen
crude
off.
oil, wasn't gas?
It was mainly gas.
Yeah, because I worked wheat harvest out in that area and the big natural gas.
Yeah.
For 40 years now. So.
There's a little oil, but not much. And so, but I don't know. I mean, again, that's another part. The higher the price of oil gets, the more incentive there is to drill some of those wells. And so to me, there's kind of two parts of what Eddie was talking about. One was the world government thing, and the other was just sort of the general just the general situation. And of course, the world has always been in turmoil, but to me, it just seems like there aren't any, or at least not many, answers. There's cost to whatever you do. Yeah. There's cost to drilling, producing more oil and gas, and there are costs to not producing more oil and gas.
To me, it's just, there is a sound way of doing this, and I think we were on the way to doing that. It's just, they're trying to go headlong, rush into this instead of allowing us to
letting it develop naturally.
Yeah, letting it develop. Everybody understands. I mean, I'm smart enough to understand that eventually electric cars are a great thing. But if I have to choose between for example, my car out front, it was $24,000 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. An electric car is the cheapest. The one that I would want to buy is going to be
comparable is at least 60.
60, right? Yeah. So I can't afford a $60,000 car. Right? Let me put it this way: in my mind, I can't afford. I choose not to afford a $60,000 when I can do it. And I like to race though. Even I'm sitting next to a Tesla. I beat one off the line the other day, which is rare, but I beat him. But anyway, and the lady was ticked too. Yeah. I'm not supposed to do that. But anyway, and I'm not a poor person. Yeah. So I think of all of these people that live, say, in North Tulsa.
No, you're right. You're exactly right.
So, but we're driving these people. So what are we really doing? We're basically creating two worlds. We're creating and I think a public transportation world, right?
Right.
And we're creating the people that can drive these expensive electric cars. But yet, the people who are driving us to that are the ones that say we're the friend of the people that are going to be riding on this public transportation.
I think there's a lot of impractical ideas in government. Yeah.
I want, before we get out, Eddie, what are you working on? Articles coming up.
Okay, well,
I bet you're going to take some time off, aren't you? After
I am actually, So today actually is the first day of 10 days off. So I'm not going to be working on anything for 10 days, but I've got a story coming out tomorrow on some of that dark money stuff, and then when I get back, we're going to be, we've got some of those runoffs coming up, so I would hope to have. Be able to talk to the guys in the U.S. Senate runoff and maybe some of our, like I said, I think we've only got 2 runoffs right here in our close area. Mm-hmm. And then, this is kind of different. It looks like I'm going to be putting my sports writer hat back on and writing a football story for the, beginning of football season. I'm going to write one about what I consider to be perhaps the most important football game in the state's history.
All right.
And it will surprise you probably which one it is.
It's teasing us.
And you can't tell us.
I'll tell you.
Next week, we got to take time to talk about all this conference realignment that's going on.
Oh, the Big Ten.
Oh yeah,
and the SEC.
that's crazy.
And
It is.
I just want to tease the story I'm working on. It's been 6 months since our last big COVID wave, and we could be done with it. But I think it'll surprise you what the most effective inoculation maybe was the Omicron variant.
Pickle juice. Okay, but
Yeah, yeah, there we go.
I'm just so tell us what is the most important. Give our audience.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you a hint. Maybe I won't give you the whole thing. All right. I'll give you a hint. It was a game that the OU Sooners lost.
Oh.
Nebraska.
Does Dave Rader have anything to do with it?
No, in fact, I'm not even sure Dave Rader would not have been born when this game was played.
Oh, you're making us work. All right, we'll watch for that. That's coming out after you.
Well, that would mean I wasn't born either. I don't think so. I definitely have no idea. Hey, listen, I want to finish up with a couple of quick things. We already did our New World Order thing, but Arizona Democrats are promoting an F the 4th event to mourn the Supreme Court decision. It's a sad state that I believe our nation is in when people don't understand the significance of the 4th of July or Independence Day. And it really hurts me and Randy, as we had talked about before the show, you know, my background. I didn't understand because I had bought into the whole black power, black militant, and again, I go to my book, which deals with a lot of that, my history and the history of slavery and the black plight in America and all, and everybody else. I deal with Native Americans. I deal with, you name them. I don't leave you out, but just the fact that people don't stop and think that if we had not been freed from the King of England, okay, if America had not sought its independence from the King of England, if the status quo had remained, I almost guarantee you there never would have been freedom for the slaves under the King of England. In other words, the independence movement that began by America, that began that whole revolutionary spirit, I believe also ushered in the idea of freedom and independence, which later only, what was it, I think 20 years later, 30 years later in 1806 is when England ended their slavery in England. And then we basically quit importing at the same time. And finally, in another 50 years or so, ended our slavery in America. But people don't understand that. We don't understand the significance of what independence and Independence Day really means, because we don't think about these things. We get some person talking about, you know, how bad America was and all the atrocities and all the bad things we've done, but we don't realize the good we have done. The people around the world we have set free, the people we have stepped in to the gap for, what we have interceded in for and died for and given ourselves for. No one wants to acknowledge that, and that is a sad, sad thing. So on this Independence weekend, day after tomorrow or tomorrow, whatever day you see this, on the 4th of July, hopefully, remember, this day is so significant, not just for this nation, but for the world, because this nation has done more for the freedom of people around the world than any other nation that exists today. And we're still trying to do that. If America dies, so does the liberty and freedom of the world. That's my opinion, and I believe it is a valid opinion. So with that, I want to thank our guest, Randy Krehbiel. And Randy, I hope you'll come in. This has probably been the most enlightening, the most fun episode we've had because we've covered so much ground.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we really appreciate it, Dave. Thank you. And you all, thank you so much. Happy 4th of July. God bless everybody, and we'll see you.
As Lawrence Welker used to say, a one and a two and a.
He still says it every Saturday.
Yeah, I know.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. Bobby and Susie.
So when
The
I was
Lennon
a kid,
sisters.
when I was a kid, my grandparents watched Lawrence Welk, and they were the only people I knew who watched Lawrence Welk. And so of course, all the people in my grandparents' generation are long gone. But Lawrence Welk is still on. Who is watching Lawrence Welk now?
I had no choice.
My mother. Yeah.
Growing up, I had one channel. It's NBC. Whatever's on, that's what we're watching.
I had a black dad, and my German mother would subject him to Lawrence Welk and me to it every week. We would have to watch Lawrence Welk. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Here, let me make sure everything is on. That's on. And we should be ready to go. All right, gentlemen. Here we go. If I can hit the right button. Hey, Dave, are we going over there?
Both of them are
Okay,
rolling.
good.
Here we go.
There we go. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I gotta hit record. It wasn't rolling.
Yes. Our usual every week song, Born Again, by the News Boys. We were just talking about Lawrence Welk. He was at the News Boys. Hey, we're happy to welcome once again into our studios this afternoon or morning or whatever time it is where you are, the one and only Tulsa World's own Randy Krehbiel. Yay! No, Randy.
Well, thank you for the riotous welcome.
Yes. No, Randy, we really do appreciate you coming in and taking your Saturday mornings to be with us. You have been a local fixture and legend in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I have read your stuff for years and years. I know Dave has.
Oh, yeah.
You're one of the few people that I actually do read in the Tulsa world.
I'll say people on the political right, Randy's got more credibility than just about anybody in print media in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And it's that old-fashioned craft of journalism, the way it used to be, Randy. I'm not saying you're old-fashioned, but I like that you remember what it is to be a journalist, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's the important thing, that the story needs to be the story, not what you think the story should be. And that's the important thing. So anyway, Randy, welcome again. And today we want to discuss Tuesday's primary elections in Oklahoma, in particular Oklahoma, because we don't really know much about any of the others. I'm sure Dave knows about everything. He knows everything. He's Mr. Know-it-all.
A little bit.
And so, and Randy probably does know a lot about some of the others too, but I disavow if I do. But no, we had kind of an election. Dave, you and I, we didn't do so well in some of our picks.
A few, but I think we picked more winners than losers.
Well,
maybe you did. I don't think. I don't
Which is why you should listen to me.
Yeah,
right?
listen to Dave. Yeah, because I don't think I did so well. I think I got maybe 3 out of the whole bunch that I picked. But anyway, I think the most important one that, at least for the primary right now, we did. But let's move right along. So I'm going to turn this primarily over to Dave and Randy because you guys are more specialists in this area than I am.
Well, yeah, I'd like to know first off top, Randy, what results surprised you the most in Oklahoma races?
Oh, wow. I don't think I was real surprised by anything. There was quite a bit. I just didn't know, like that second congressional district.
Oh, wow.
I had no idea how that was going to.
Nobody.
So, I mean,
There were so many.
So there were 20 or 30 that I thought probably would not win, but I didn't know who would come out. And it's not a big surprise that, I mean, there were like 6 guys, and any of those 2 would not have been a surprise to get in the runoff.
Yeah.
And the Senate, the one primary with the big primary for the Inhofe seat, that pretty much went as everybody expected.
I think you're right.
I thought it was kind of interesting. I mean, different people have different outlooks on this. I thought it was kind of interesting that Nathan Dahm got 12%. I think that's not a bad showing for him.
No, I agree.
I could, for housekeeping, for those who've been living under a rock this last week, so in the second district you're referring to, nobody got 15%.
Right.
Everything was 14 and some or less.
The two runoff guys got less than 30% of the vote.
Right.
So
Combined.
Yeah. Less than 30% combined. There were 14 contestants in that, and I think it was 5 of them were within 4 percentage points.
Yeah.
Of the top. And we're talking about I don't know, roughly I think 75,000 people voted in that election. So there weren't a lot of votes really. But when you start dividing them up 14 different ways, that's pretty close. And so we're going to have a guy from Muskogee versus a guy from Colgate in the final. And
I said the Cherokees versus the Choctaws.
Well, it's kind of that too.
I'm stirring up dissension, Eddie.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure either one of them are actually tribal names. I don't think they are, but yeah. And so that'll be
it should have been Teehee versus No Fire.
Okay.
You want to real?
There's tribal race. But the funny thing, and I think Randy, you're alluding to it here, is we're going to have a runoff in later August, and what are we saying? 2/3 of those voters have to pick somebody new, and then there's just naturally not going to be the turnout if it follows.
That's usually the case.
So it's anybody's shot here, really.
Yeah, no, that's what I would say, and I think it's I think the one thing that kind of was not noticed was that there was actually quite a bit of outside.
We don't have a recording of this.
Oh.
We got lousy audio on that. Should we start it again, Eddie?
We'll start from the beginning.
I think so. I mean, it's going to be lousy product.
Okay.
There, the light's on. We haven't been recording.
Yeah, that's what I gathered, yeah.
I just figured you had it all done. You had it all ready. So
No, I
you
didn't.
figured it's okay. So
Yeah.
And this was a good one too.
Yeah, well, okay.
We'll
All
be
right.
better the second time. We're
All
going to
right,
hit the
yeah.
bumper and then go right back into it.
All right. Okay, here we go.